Hey, David Marquet here. Welcome to Feedback Friday. Got a question this week about punishing people. When is it the right thing to do? How do you do it? What are the most effective ways? That kind of thing. Sometimes we get questions, or often we get questions about holding people accountable, which I think is kind of a thinly veiled way of asking about this punishment question. Well, two things. One, it's probably not the right thing to do, and it's probably not going to work anyway. Here's why. First, let me talk about why it's probably not the right thing to do. We have a story from one of our clients. This is a bakery. They got some new production equipment, ovens and that kind of thing, and the manufacturer's reps stayed there for 3 weeks. This multiple sites, a big bakery. And they stayed, they did some training, and for 3 weeks they kind of stood alongside the team as they got up to speed on the new equipment. And they got up to about a 60-70% throughput relative to what the manufacturer claimed 100% throughput could be with the machines. And there was a sense from the trainers, that's probably good enough. It's probably about as good as you're going to get. And at the end of the 3 weeks, the contract for the training was over and they left. The very next week, production went down to 20%, which was a big problem because clients were shorted and there was a big management challenge there. Now, you could say, well, those people need to be punished because they're only giving 20% output. And fortunately, they didn't do that. They started asking questions about what was going on. And what they learned was that there were a bunch of unwritten rules about how to tweak the machines to get them just right, which the manufacturer's reps had known and were sort of imparting, but hadn't been fully internalized by the team. But it wasn't about blaming the team. As a benefit of building that culture where management asked questions from curiosity rather than taking some kind of punitive approach, they then got back up to the 67% effectiveness. But then they went over the next several months, they went even further, and they got to 115% production rate because the people running the machines were being listened to, and their ideas were being acted on, and they engaged their thinking and their creativity, and they started seeing ways even beyond where the manufacturer had specified, where they could use the machines in more efficient ways, reduce downtime, and all this other kind of stuff. And so now they're way better than even kind of what the manufacturer expected them to do. One way to think about this is about person versus system in terms of blame and cause. So on my 2x2 chart here, I have got person, system. What's the system? The system is the culture, it's the environment, it's the rules, written and unwritten, for how we operate. It's how we run meetings, that kind of thing. And it's common that the system has more control over our behavior than we like to think. Humans underappreciate how powerful the environment is on the choices we make to speak up or not speak up, or engage in some kind of behavior or not. However, this is the job of leadership. In healthy organizations, leadership say, I'm going to create the best possible culture so that it makes it easy for you to speak up, it makes it easy for you to operate ethically. And the team says, despite whatever culture there is, I have an obligation to speak up and operate ethically. In dysfunctional cultures, what you get is this cross where the team is like, well, I can't speak up because you're making an unsafe culture, and the leaders say, well, you didn't speak up, so you need to go to speak up training. That doesn't really work. The problem is, if the problem is with the system, but we blame the individual, so our corrective actions are focused on the individual, then two things are going to happen. Number one, people are unhappy because they feel like I was treated unfairly because it wasn't really my fault. And number two is you didn't really solve the problem. The problem's just going to recur because the behavior of the team will just continue being the behavior that's incentivized by the culture. And then it's going to keep happening over and over again. We do see, and it's possible to have the other situation, which is it really was the fault of a single person. It could be that it was simply one person not doing the right thing that day, or it could be what we would call special cause. A meteorite landed on the building. We're not going to plan for that contingency. It's just a one-off, and we're going to keep going. And the problem is, if we take those special cause events and then we blame the system, again, people in the team say, oh, that person got away with it. So there's a sense of unfairness and unhappiness. But also you get overall degradation in performance because the system never stabilizes, and we don't understand system performance because we keep tweaking the system before really getting it done. And unfortunately, I saw this in the Navy a fair amount, where a ship, for example, would run aground, and every time that happened, we'd have to change the procedures and change the rules and add supervision and inject another layer of overhead onto the chart and navigation process, as opposed to sometimes just saying, those guys were just boneheads that day, and we don't need to change the whole system because one group of people wasn't thinking right and got it wrong. So it takes courage sometimes for leaders to say this, but I wouldn't use that as an excuse. In general, as a leader, you want to think about, well, how did the culture or the environment cause the behavior that I'm seeing? The second thing is it's probably not going to actually work. No one's going to come to work saying, oh, thank you for punishing me. I will now give you all my energy, all my thinking, all my passion and creativity. That's going to be pretty unlikely. What happens is when we punish people, we're creating, it's part of the coercive tool set that industrial age leaders have come to rely upon, which is embedded in a structure of I tell you what to do and you have to do what I tell you what to do. And it's not going to work because what we're doing is activating people's extrinsic motivators. So in other words, if an extrinsic motivator feels like I should do it because if I don't, I'll get in trouble. But there's an external reason why, I'm not going to make my parents happy, I'm making my boss happy, whatever it is. There's an external cause. Versus intrinsic motivation comes from the satisfaction in the task itself. And there are a number of studies which show that intrinsic motivation is better. Better for creativity. It's better for the health of the people because it causes less stress. We can be our more authentic selves, and on and on. So when we're punishing people, we're activating an extrinsic coercive motivational structure, which may get people to a certain minimum, but you're never going to achieve the highest possible potential for teams, versus allowing people to tap into their own intrinsic motivation. I've seen this firsthand. On the Santa Fe, the year before I got there, we had 10 captain's masts. Now, military organizations grant the military commander, the captain on a ship, for example, a pretty wide latitude for punishment because it's important that the commander have the ability to execute punishment in order to maintain good order and discipline for the unit as a whole. But some people overuse that. And this 10 times, this was the way we dealt with people before I got there. It's not totally uncommon. I think this was a bit of an outlier. But everything that people did, they were getting punished for, there's too many of them. It was almost one a month. In the next 12 months, we only had one. We had way better performance, way better morale, and we have many fewer problems. Now, I'm not saying that because we stopped punishing people, morale went up. But I'm saying that in the context of really looking at the problem and seeing that many, many times people were actually trying to do their best, but we were putting them in a bad situation, resulted in all these knock-on benefits. And I didn't have to, quote, punish people. The one case was where a sailor was drinking and driving. And this was a clear thing we had talked about. The person had made some bad choices, and so I took him to captain's mast, and I did punish them. But it went very quickly, and the person recognized. And unfortunately, they were coached by their leader. Hey, look, you did it, trying to deny it, because we had less evidence. Anyway, that's another story. But the point is, you can have really good process discipline, adherence to procedures, and that kind of thing without the specter of punishing people. I'm David Marquet. That's your Feedback Friday Nudge.